Today on Newsgirls, Trump move helps hide Russian billionaires' yachts.
Fine art by Monet and Van Gogh, luxury homes in Beverly Hills, New York, and London.
Several close Trump allies had previously been implicated by MAGA fashion. Super blonde hair, always like curled, giant cross necklaces.
He literally matches flag, and he stands there in front of like 50 flags.
It's not just fashion, it's the enhancements, it's the makeup.
And commemorating Juneteenth in historic New York City. Heading up to Harlem today to check out some civil rights landmarks.
So we're here at Langston Hughes' house.
Really what Minton's is known for is establishing a sound, a genre of jazz. Do you guys want to hear some bebop jazz?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Welcome to Newsgirls.
I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel.
Let's get into the stories.
So imagine you're floating in the waters off the coast of Fiji on a mega huge yacht nearly as long as a football field. There's floors of delicate marble, a lobster tank, a pizza oven, a mosaic tiled pool, and even a Fabergé egg.
And as you pull into dock in Fiji, U.S. federal agents storm aboard and arrest you because it turns out you are a Russian oligarch and you paid for this $300 million super yacht with stolen money.
And this is what really happened to Suleyman Kerimov, one of the richest men in Russia with a net worth of $16 billion and suspicious ties to the Kremlin. And his capture was thanks to a small, pretty unknown DOJ task force called Kleptocapture.
And this was established in 2022 right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, basically to target oligarchs close to Putin and enforce Russian sanctions. So, to identify and capture, klepto-capture, yachts and penthouses and private jets.
And the U.S. has been slowly issuing sanctions against these Russian billionaires that have political ties for decades. But this task force, which Biden actually announced during his 2022 State of the Union, was created to confiscate their wealth, sell their assets, and then send the profits to Ukraine to help fund the war.
And it was an extension of a program called Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative, which we'll just call CARI, which basically did the same thing, but for kleptocracies all around the world, with the goal of returning whatever money it can recover to the country of origin.
And these initiatives recovered billions of dollars, but more importantly, we're basically sending a message to shady governments and criminal organizations saying that if you skirt the law, no matter how powerful you are, the US will send its best agents after you and prosecute you. So these programs were kind of on the rise until one random day during Trump's first month in office, the DOJ put out a long memo and buried on the fourth page in 2 sentences, CARI and Kleptocapture were disbanded.
And that was really shocking and concerning to the national security community for many reasons, one of which because several close Trump allies had previously been implicated by kleptocracy works. So, Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was convicted of tax and bank fraud after an investigation led by the kleptocracy team, and their work stifled a lucrative development deal by Steve Witkoff, who we know is Trump's special envoy to the Middle East and unofficially Russia.
And of course, the DOJ memo didn't mention any of that. We also found that Elliot Broidy, a Republican Party fundraiser who helped gather really big donors for Trump's 2016 campaign, was engaging in an illegal lobbying campaign to get the U.S. government to drop a really big CARI investigation of Malaysian fraud. And Trump actually ended up pardoning him.
That Malaysian case was actually CARI's biggest bust ever. They recovered a total of $1.7 billion in stolen assets from a Malaysian government fund that was created to literally promote economic development and improve the well-being of Malaysian people. But instead, CARI found that these funds were being misappropriated by high-level officials.
Which is so disgusting. These funds were supposed to help people, but instead they were used to buy luxury homes in Beverly Hills, New York, and London, a 300-foot super yacht, fine art by Monet and Van Gogh, and even the movie production that made The Wolf of Wall Street.
Random. And that's just one of many CARI recovery missions. They also brought a case against the son of Equatorial Guinea's president/dictator, Mbasogo.
And he's been the dictator since 1982, which is forever. And according to Forbes, he's one of the wealthiest heads of state in the world.
Well, CARI found that his son used his position to loot more than $300 million from the country, which he used to purchase a Malibu mansion, a Ferrari, 6 life-size Michael Jackson statues. He's a huge MJ fan. But ultimately, his son reached a settlement with the US to sell everything, except he was able to keep Jackson's famous white crystal glove and his private jet. So he's still living large.
And the list goes on. They've busted relatives of the Honduran president, Bangladeshi cricket organizer, and even the former dictator of Nigeria. And the reason that we think this story is important is because through our research, we found that these DOJ kleptocracy groups really helped create the blueprint in targeting these high-profile political criminals and then seizing their assets. And that's really difficult, especially when it comes to seizing billions in offshore accounts, which is like a majority of these cases.
Yeah, we saw the offshore world described as a constellation of territories and nations operating with the same general aim of helping wealthy people move and hide their money. And we all know about like Switzerland and the Cayman Islands for being these famous tax havens. But you might not know Hong Kong, Dubai, the Isle of Man, and surprisingly South Dakota are also.
And because these accounts are all over the world, these klepto groups have to like build cases that link them to the US in order to have like the authority to seize them. So with the yacht example we mentioned at the beginning, they found that $1.3 million were spent on the boat's upkeep through US banks, and that's what gave them the grounds to seize what was apparently one of the most expensive yachts in the world.
So beyond the speculation that Trump was kind of helping his wealthy friends by disbanding these initiatives, why else would he want to shut them down? Well, when Pam Bondi announced the end of it, she said it was to refocus DOJ staff and resources on the total elimination of drug cartels.
Which was confusing to us because a lot of these shell companies that were targeted by Kerry and registered in the US were used to traffic drugs like fentanyl and then launder hundreds of millions in proceeds. So in one case, a major Chinese synthetic opioid trafficking gang used companies registered in Massachusetts to ship fentanyl to US states.
All right, so it's actually counterproductive. The Guardian wrote, "It's hard to overstate how central Washington has been to global efforts to tackle corruption, financial crime, and kleptocracy. It invented the idea of fighting money laundering, and its prosecutions and indictments have been more ambitious than ever seen."
But of course, so much was like happening in the world in Trump's first month of presidency when Kerry was disbanded. So it kind of got swept under the rug. So we spoke to Annalise Burkhart, who's the lead on asset recovery work for Transparency International, which is the world's largest coalition against corruption.
Okay, so Annalise, our first question before Kerry was disbanded earlier this year, what exactly did it work on and why was its work so important?
So let's say you have a former prime minister or the head of a state-owned enterprise in another country, and they're involved in a scheme where they're either receiving bribes from illegally awarding a contract to a company that they're connected to, or they're just straight up siphoning off public funds. A lot of time that money winds up in the United States. And when people think of havens for dirty money, the islands always come to mind, the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas. But in reality, the easiest place to launder dirty money has historically been the United States. This has just been due to a variety of gaps in our anti-money laundering framework. So in simple terms, Kerry, this was the unit. These are the guys who were going after the yachts. They were going after the penthouses, the luxury cars, watches, you name it. Any and all assets, including cash just sitting in bank accounts, moved through the U.S. financial system that had been illicitly acquired. A lot of times, they wouldn't want to return money because it could be at risk of getting stolen again if there's a country that doesn't have the proper safeguards in place, or even what the money is going to be used for once it's returned.
We're assuming it's difficult to navigate. How did Kerry kind of find the proper framework to do that and actually prosecute these people when so much international jurisdiction is involved?
There is a lot of international cooperation necessary to even get these cases jump-started. Kerry, they're full of, trained individuals who have been working on financial crime. They work with a bunch of other federal agencies, including the FBI. The FBI has an international corruption unit, and then also Homeland Security investigations at the Department of Homeland Security. Sometimes, these cases get started from whistleblowers, leaks, investigative journalists.
And so if we're talking about kind of the big picture impact of these kleptocracy programs, do you think they changed the way that these crimes are targeted and ultimately prosecuted? Did they find a template that works?
Yeah, definitely. Especially all the different task forces set up after Russia's invasion into Ukraine in 2022, klepto capture. At the EU level, they had the freeze and seize, and then there was also REPO, Russian elites, proxies, and oligarchs task force, and that was the G7 and then Australia. So you had a bunch of these bodies formed. I think it really helps streamline communication, and so the template is down for what it looks like to seize an asset.
And so it's so clear to us at least, why these programs were so important. Just to ask the obvious question, why did the Trump administration disband it?
That's a really great question. Your guess is probably as good as mine. I think like in the early days of the administration, there was, the sentiment of just like, let's cut everything that doesn't seem to have an immediate direct net benefit. Then ramifications of cutting a program like this probably was not obvious to folks like just coming into the administration. Around the same time when they announced that this would be disbanded, the Department of Justice also said that they were going to be pausing enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is like the US's landmark anti-bribery law. It was passed in 1977, and it's kind of served as like a model anti-bribery law for governments around the world. So this was a huge, like really concerning setback. But actually, just this past week, they announced that they were going to be resuming enforcement of the FCPA. It's still kind of unclear to see what that will look like.
In like the memo where the DOJ was disbanding Carrie, we saw that their rationalization was kind of because they wanted more money and resources to combat like drug cartels. Does that make sense to you that they're kind of shutting all of these down to like pool all of their resources for something else?
Yeah, I don't think those two things are like it's not mutually exclusive. It's been kind of frustrating to see that messaging, honestly, because I think if the administration really wanted to get serious about tackling like the fentanyl crisis here in America and going after these like transnational criminal organizations, TCOs, and cartels that they talk about, they should focus more on strengthening the United States' anti-money laundering framework and not weakening it. I mean, with also the new like golden visa program that we're offering and sort of the evolving nature of the US's relations with Russia right now, I think that disbanding klepto-capture was sort of like sending probably a friendly signal to Russia, because so much of what klepto-capture was a signal, that we were willing, able, and capable to go after these kinds of assets, that we were going to support Ukraine in this war. And now we're just kind of seeing a full like draw out of that space.
So a couple weeks ago, we saw an article in the New York Times breaking down what is MAGA fashion. So like Trump, Make America Great Again fashion.
Yeah, like fashion in DC is never really like a point of conversation. There's really not much going on besides everyone wearing like blazers and stuff. But since Trump took office, we're seeing a lot of people in his administration in close circle wearing and looking similar.
I always think of like super blonde hair, like always like curled. I see in my head like Caroline Leavitt's giant cross necklaces, different like bright colored like matching set suits, like super tan.
Yeah, and this look has apparently gained a lot of popularity. I was reading this article about how like a famous plastic surgeon in New York now opened like a Palm Beach office, and he said that all of his clients would come in asking for like a very Kardashian look. That was kind of in the past decade what people would always ask for. But now in his Palm Beach location, because there's so many Mar-a-Lago events and all of these like political people are kind of flocking there, they're asking to look more and more like Ivanka and Melania. So clearly this trend is starting to trickle down into what's become popular now.
Well, that is another crucial like pillar of the MAGA look, is some kind of plastic surgery, and not just on the women, but like think of Matt Gaetz. Like, we all remember those eyebrows.
And it seems like Trump voters have really like embraced this kind of look. We've never talked about this on the show before, but Wren and I, for the Daily Beast, actually went to cover a MAGA fashion show in Ronkonkoma, Long Island.
No, it was crazy. Like, we've never been to an event like this. So it was in a space called the America First Warehouse. And we will show pictures and video on the screen because you have to see it to believe it. You walk in, and it's a giant warehouse, like huge. And every square inch was covered with some kind of Trump paraphernalia, like posters, signs. There were different cars that were like decaled with Trump, like every tchotchke you can imagine.
American flags, everything was red. It was literally like a Trumpian like fever dream.
And of course, it was the perfect location for what followed, which was an insane fashion show. And we actually got to interview some of the designers, and they're all huge Trump supporters. It was like Make America Sparkle Again. And she sold like super sequined like jackets that said like 47 on the back, or one even said Swifties for Trump.
There were even like booths where people were selling products. So there was this one that we loved where this guy was selling like MAGA red lipstick, and it was for people that were like too afraid to wear Trumper hats and stuff, but they like women could always wear their MAGA red lipstick.
And it was supposedly the exact same shade as the MAGA hats.
And Wren and I, for the fashion show, thank God, snagged front row seats, like the biggest accomplishment of our lives.
And then do you want to talk about your favorite designer?
Michelangelo. It was this woman who's like famous for drawing
she's an amazing painter. She actually is.
And like painting these like Trump in pop culture like paintings.
It's like his face on like Rocky's body or Hercules' body. Like insane.
And apparently Trump owns a couple of the paintings.
That's what she said.
That's what she said. And we saw her at the event and she was wearing this like mermaid gown that had like the American flag painted on it.
And most of the styles were like not good. Like they
Yeah,
were
they
like
were bad.
very over the top, like insane colors, like but lots of sparkle, like bedazzled and like beaded stuff. So much red, white, and blue. But there was, remember Sarah Brady?
Yeah.
Like she was actually like an amazing like ball gown that said like 1776 and like Trump's face and like the flag on it. It was like beautiful.
Yeah, it was like couture.
She also did like a couture like black sequin like strapless gown that just said Trump on the front.
It was pretty. Yeah.
So I guess that was our little like foray into what is MAGA fashion. And so today we're so excited to speak to Vanessa Friedman, who's actually the chief fashion critic for the New York Times, to learn more about what exactly it entails.
Vanessa, we read that Trump and his inner circle kind of came onto the DC political scene and really changed up the style there. Can you kind of walk us through what the style in DC politics was before? What is it now post-Trump?
I mean, I think using the word style in conjunction with DC has always been somewhat like a controversial pairing. I think most people would say DC does not have style.
Fair.
Kind of conventional wisdom when it came to political dressing is that you want to look respectful and neat, but most people are not there to make a fashion statement, right? They're there to legislate. You don't want to call attention to your clothes, right? Everyone plays it safe. Trump brought his own version of a uniform to Washington, and like everything else he did, it was different from what was there in the beginning. His goal is not to fit in with the establishment. It is to remake the establishment.
And so do you mean Trump himself or like the people in his orbit? Like how is the MAGA verse shaken up the style, and how has Trump himself shaken it up?
Well, he's the leader of this, right? He's really the face of this. So people are dressing to please him, whatever they are. I mean, like I think at the congressional baseball game, whatever it was, like half the GOP contestants were all wearing MAGA hats. And he is a genius at this, right? Like he really gets image making and he gets the importance of it. The entire cabinet is wearing the Trump uniform, right? They're all in like blue suits and white shirts and red ties. And that has been true, since he announced his candidacy. He dresses like the flag. Like he literally matches the flag, and he stands there in front of like 50 flags. And then he fades into the flag. And that is that is straight from the authoritarian playbook. And it's a very simple subconscious equation, right? Because if you see that enough, then you think Trump is flag, flag is country, Trump is country, going against him is going against the country.
And we've seen you write about how like MAGA style for women, at least, has become more evident in their beauty choices. It's not just fashion, it's the enhancements, it's the makeup. So what trends are we seeing in that sphere?
There is a real Trump female look, and it has to do with like long brick girl hair, like Miss America hair with a bit of a blow dry and a curl, and false eyelash. I mean, it's a sort of fox makeup, right? Like false eyelashes and plumped up lips, and it's a very Jessica Rabbit kind of Barbie cartoonishly classic idea of femininity, and it has been embraced by numerous women, both in the administration and, in the sort of the Trump core family, right? It is the look of Lara. Was the look of Kimberly Guilfoyle. It is the look of Don Jr.'s new girlfriend. It is sometimes the look of Ivanka. Sometimes she's a little more blow dried. It's the look of Melania, like they're the model. And then, if you look at like the evolution of Kristi Noem, like she has made herself fit that mold.
And do you think for the women, are they taking cues from like trying to cater to a male gaze? Are they following, obviously Melania would be the most well-known woman in the MAGAverse, being the first lady. Are they looking at her and trying to replicate her? Or is it just from Fox News? Like, what is their inspiration?
I think it's a combination of all of the above. I think it's clear that this is the kind of archetype or paradigm of a woman that Trump responds to, right? He wanted women to dress like women, right? What he means is he wants high heels and a sheath dress and the hair, and we know part of his selling point, right? One of his policies is about gender. Right. He signed an executive order saying there were two genders. And his administration models that. Right. Like there is a woman who looks like this cartoonish kind of woman. And the men, you look at someone like Pete Hegseth and like he's got the hair and the jaw and the tattoos. He's a guy. And it's a very kind of cosplay version of masculinity. It's RFK Jr. doing push-ups to like show how tough he is.
Like style in politics always has a message, and it seems like they're really, like you said, cohesive in the way that they're doing that. What would you say the fashion aesthetic is for the Democratic Party? Like, do you think they have one? Do they need one?
I mean, I think it's the same as their policy making, right? It's the problem with the Democrats is they're all it's like a loose amalgamation of little sort of what seem like small interest groups in different positions, and they look like they're chaotic and messy. And part of that is, it is kind of the identity of the Democrats, not an authoritarian party. And the clothes reflect that.
You wrote how Elon, when he goes into the Oval Office wearing very casual clothes, they think that's so cool. But then when Zelensky comes in and his country's at war, he gets berated for doing the same thing. Why is there this double standard?
Both kinds of dress are tools for Trump to make a public point. And they knew that Zelensky was going to wear that because they asked him not to wear it before the visit. So that whole thing was really staged, right? Mm-hmm. Which again speaks to like Trump's ability to create these kind of theatrical made for TV moments. And so Elon Musk was supposed to be disruptive. He was supposed to go in there and like, blow out the establishment and clear out the cobwebs. And so for him, wearing something that didn't look like what everyone else in DC is wearing was exactly doing his job, right? Like he was representing the point of his job.
Are there any recent examples in politics that kind of stand out to you where the fashion really represents this new era?
I mean, I think Kirsten Ohm is just like the gift that keeps on giving in this way. Whether it was the giant, gold Rolex in front of the prison, which speaks to like Trump's love of wealth and aspiration and gold and, femininity to a certain extent, or Melania, right, who is always sending really interesting signals with her clothing.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you about her inauguration, the hat that broke the internet.
It was significant that she kept it on the entire time. And it was weird because it shielded her face. And the inauguration in particular, which is purely ritual, right? The kind of stepping into the spotlight of the new first family that will represent the United States, for the next 4 years. So for her to step into the spotlight and then remain half hidden, was an interesting choice. It seemed to represent her ambivalence about the job, about coming back to DC, about having to share any of her life.
And are we seeing like these kind of Trumpian beauty fashion trends make it into the mainstream culture? Are we predicting that we're going to see that?
I think it will form part of what we think of as the history of this time period. These were the images that people will look at when they look back at the Trump administration. Whether it will filter out really broadly, I don't know. I mean, it takes a certain amount of money and maintenance.
That's true.
To achieve. So I think, within the very tight world of like Mar-a-Lago and where the other sort of Trumpian haunts, all the private clubs now in DC, I think you will see a lot of it. Whether you will see it, across the country, less clear.
Hey you guys, we are up in Harlem, which is the very northern part of Manhattan, and we are about to meet our friend Nigel Roxbury because he runs the NYC History Hub Instagram account, and he was heading up to Harlem today to check out some historic civil rights landmarks, and we thought since it's our Juneteenth episode, it'd be a perfect way to commemorate the holiday.
Yeah, we're so excited to learn more about some of these places that have been around for like over 100 years. So we're here at Langston Hughes' house. So Nigel, tell us about this place. What have you learned?
So Langston Hughes, poet, playwright, novelist, civil rights activist as well. He lived here from 1947 until his death. So Langston Hughes is very important in the grand scope of like the Harlem Renaissance, right? So you had a lot of Southern blacks who were still being affected by what was now called the Jim Crow laws in the South, and they needed a place to migrate to feel a bigger sense of freedom. Harlem originally was largely Irish and Italian Americans, but a large influx in the late 1900s, early 1910s, through like the settling kind of this area, came an abundance of art, an abundance of fabulous writing, and obviously jazz music. And Langston Hughes really took it upon himself to write about the plight of the African American in the United States. How he started writing was as a columnist for various newspapers, and he was kind of like an on-the-scene beat reporter. And he was just seeing discrimination left and right, obviously, in the United States. He also lived through it, being from Joplin, Missouri, and coming to New York through his voice really was an empowering figure to African Americans, not only in Harlem, New York City, but around the world.
So, Nigel, now we're at Mother Zion Church, which we understand is super historic. So tell
Correct.
us a little about that.
1796. First of all, this is the 6th iteration of this church. This is not the original from 1796, pretty sure. That would have been made out of wood. But yeah, this was a huge place for the Underground Railroad and the Harlem Renaissance as well. So Sojourner Truth was a member of this congregation. Harriet Tubman was a member, Frederick Douglass. So you have like kind of the three of the biggest abolitionists of the time. The thing about this place too is it started as like an anti-slavery activism unit, and like a place where they could congregate and talk about segregation in the United States, right?
Wow.
Because New York was a free state, right? So people would come from the South. 700 to 800 slaves were kind of routed through here and saved due to Mother Zion Church. You get a realization of like how historic this all is.
So we are at Minton's Playhouse.
Minton's Playhouse, so established in the 1930s. Really what Minton's is known for is establishing a genre of jazz called bebop jazz. It's largely improvisational, and it was curated because at Minton's, they would have these jam sessions to end every night. So you would have like an act like posted on a flyer, whatever, like, 7, 8, and then starting at whatever, 10, 11, there would literally just be jam sessions. And all of these Harlem jazz artists, Cannonball Adderley, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, like you name them, they were here. And out of those jam sessions came bebop. Do you guys want to hear some bebop jazz?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Really fast, aggressive, almost dancey. And then kind of entering into a new era of Minton's, you had Miles Davis, you had John Coltrane, you had the Chet Bakers of the world coming here, playing here. They didn't do as much of the like jam session-esque things because they were kind of turning away customers by like improvising so much and doing all these things.
Oh,
and
wow.
At the time, they weren't legends like they are now.
Yeah.
Sadly, Minton's has closed down like 3 times. And now it's back, and it's actually one of my favorite jazz clubs in New York City. Great place for a date, great place for a hang, bring some friends, grab a drink.
And apparently, like, Minton's, like, on top of it, it used to be, like, a hotel that
The Cecil Hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently now it's, like, low-income housing, and there's, like, 100 people that live in this hotel, and then Minton's once a week will, like, deliver leftovers and, like, food to them. So
Love
it's, like,
it.
a nice, like, community, helping community, like, spot.
Yeah, this is like a place obviously still open that we need to support as New Yorkers because it's so ingrained within the history of music and culture and just New York City in general.
Well, Nigel, thank you so much.
Of course.
We learned a lot today.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having
that
me,
was so
guys.
fun, and it's, like, a really good way to commemorate Juneteenth.
Bye.
Bye.